If you're trying to get your head around negative numbers and you're preparing for your GCSEs, then let me help you out with some tips and tricks to getting it right every single time. In this lesson, we will look at what negative numbers are, and then we will look at the 4 operations with negative numbers. I'm going to jump right in, so if you need a little longer to read the task board, then pause the video now. And if you'd like to get involved and answer some of the questions for yourself, then all you'll need is a pen and something to write on. Negative numbers are the numbers we find when we move less than 0. We will all be quite comfortable and familiar with positive numbers. That's numbers greater than 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and onwards into infinity. That also works for negative numbers, and the further away you get from 0, the larger the number next to the negative symbol becomes. So from 0, we have -1, and even smaller than that is -2, and even smaller than that is -3, and we will keep going again to negative infinity. One thing I want us to be familiar with, which I think will help you if you're struggling with negative numbers, is the concept of a 0 pair. And that is when you have a positive and a negative, but of equal respective value, so for example +3 and -3, if you combine them, if you were to add them together, they would cancel each other out to get 0. Let me give you some examples. So like I've just said, if you have -3 and +3 and you add those together, they cancel each other out, you get 0. Likewise, if I pick another number, let me choose -6, and you add to that +6, they cancel each other out, you'll get 0. So this is the idea of a 0 pair. For every positive, we can cancel it out with a negative and get 0. And for every negative, we can cancel it out with a positive and get 0. That will be helpful for us when we're adding and subtracting negatives in just a moment. So let's look at adding positive and negative numbers together. We're going to be working with integers today, although these strategies can also be applied to decimals. And I'm going to use those positive negative counters we looked at before just to help illustrate the point, and hopefully it will help you understand it a little bit better. So if you consider we're starting with 6. So here we have 6 positive counters. If I then add in 3 more positive counters, altogether I have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positive counters, which hopefully we would have already known. 6 plus 3 is 9. However, when you introduce adding a negative number, like in the second example, here's how it's different. So we're starting with 6 again. We are starting with +6. So I need my 6 positive counters. However, what I'm adding to that, so what I need to introduce, is -3. So this time I need 3 negative counters. Now remember what I said about 0 pairs. For every positive and negative pair, they cancel each other out. So if we look here, I can cancel this positive and this negative out because that equals 0. 1 positive and 1 negative equals 0. Likewise, I can do the same here. Cancel out this positive and this negative, so I'll cross them out. And once more, cancel out this positive with this negative. So if we imagine that those ones I've crossed out no longer exist because they're just worth 0, all we are left with is +3, which we can see here. Because everything else is gone, everything else is cancelled out, so 6 plus -3 is just 3. And don't forget, you can use this strategy for yourself, even in your exam. If you just want to draw yourself some little circles that represent positives and negatives, you absolutely can. You don't have to use the colours, but you can put little pluses and little minuses inside them so you know how many positives and how many negatives you've got. Here's one for you to have a go at. So I'm going to give you normal 7 plus 5, just so you can think about what we thought about in our first example, and then similarly 7 plus -5. I'm going to go straight through the answer, so if you want to pause the video so you've got time to answer it, then please do that now. Okay, let's have a look at this question then. So hopefully we know that 7 add 5 is just 12. If I drew 7 positive counters and then another 5 positive counters, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 if we add those on. However, with your 7 plus -5, I'm going to use a bit of space here. So if I draw 7 positive counters, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm drawing these ones by hand just so you can see that you would be able to do this yourself in your exam. What I'm hoping is that those of you that have had a go at this question for yourself, this is similar to what you've done. Let me change colour. Now I'm adding 5 negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I've used different colours just to make it a bit clearer if this is your first time seeing this, but in your exam you wouldn't have to. You could just use your normal pen and use pluses and minuses to indicate the difference. Now remember what I said, every plus and minus pair cancels out to 0, that's why we call them 0 pairs. So those will cancel out, those will cancel out, those will cancel out, those will cancel out, and those will cancel out because they were all worth 0 overall, which means we're just left with 2 positives. So the answer is 2. In this next set of examples, we have still got a negative add a positive, but the negative value is larger. What I mean by that is we've got more negative than we have positive. We've got -6, but only +3. Let's have a look what happens with this question. So there are my 6 negatives, and I'm going to introduce 3 positives because it's -6 add +3. So we're going to look for anywhere we can cancel out. So what 0 pairs we can make. I can cancel those 2 to make 0, those 2 to make 0, and those 2 to make 0. So hopefully what you can see is we are left with -3 or 3 negatives. This next question is the sort of question I'd see a lot of mistakes on because of incorrect information people have been given in the past. Potentially when you were younger, maybe at primary school, someone has probably said to you, 2 negatives make a positive. And whilst that's true for some areas of working with negative numbers, it's not true for all areas of negative numbers, and so I'm really sorry if someone's giving you that misinformation. Multiplying 2 negatives will give a positive. In this case, we will not get a positive answer. Let me show you why. Here are my first 6 negatives to represent the -6, and then we are adding -3, so we're adding 3 more negatives. What we've got altogether here is -9. That is not suddenly a positive because we've added 2 negatives together. That is -9. If I start with a negative and I add more negatives to that, I'm only going to keep getting more and more negative. Here's a pair for you to have a go at. Same drill again. If you want to write your own counters as you work this out, that's absolutely fine. You're more than welcome to do that. Or you might be starting to see patterns where it means you don't need to and you can just write down the answers. Either way, if you need time to do this one, pause the video now because I'm going to go through the answer. Okay, so here we have got 8 negatives and I will just use my space up here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oh, running out of room, 8. So here are my 8 negative counters. And then I'm going to be adding in 4 positive counters, which I'll do from this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4 positive counters. And just like before, we are looking for when we can cancel out 0 pairs. So we've got 1 there, we've got 1 there, we've got 1 there, and we've got 1 there, which leaves me with 4 negatives at the end, which means my answer is -4. Well done if you got that one. With the other question, so we're starting again with 8 negatives. I'll do these ones down the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just squeeze them in there. Put my negative symbol in. And then we are adding 4 more negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I count these up when I'm done, all together, we have got 12 negatives, so our answer is -12. Now we're going to look at subtraction. Here we have got 5 take away 4. This is just normal subtraction, just so you can see the difference between subtracting a positive number and subtracting a negative number. So if we've got 5 take away 4 and I start with 5 positives, and I simply want to take 4 of those positives away, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, I've crossed them out, and I'm just left with +1, which I'm sure we all already knew. However, when you have got 5 positives and you want to take away 4 negatives, That's quite difficult to do when we haven't got any negatives to take away. I've got no negative counters that I can cross out. So we need to do something that introduces those negative counters. And to do that, we just add in 0 pairs. Because what I've done there is I've added a value that is basically equal to 0. So I've not changed the value. I've just introduced a way of representing nothing. And I will do that in pairs until I've got those 4 negatives to cross out. So when I've introduced, in this case, 4 0 pairs, because I need to take away 4 negatives, then I know I'll have enough. So now I've done that. I've got my 4 negatives that I can cross out, like so. And we can look at how many positives are now left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so the answer is positive 9. Now, this is one of those questions where it does work when someone says to you, if you've got 2 negatives, it makes a positive. In this case, some people like to think of this as the 2 side-by-side negatives merging together to make an add. Some people like to think about it that way, some people don't. I'm going to remove it so it's not there when you come to compare it to your example. Okay, and here are 2 questions for you, much the same as my examples. Take care with that second one, introducing 0 pairs, as many as you need to be able to take away 2 negatives. Pause the video now so you've got more time to do it. Okay, so with the first one, hopefully we do know that 9 take away 2 is just 7, and I don't need to write down any counters to work that out. But if you did, you would just draw out 9 positive counters and cross out 2 of them, leaving you with 7. However, with the second question, not so straightforward. So let me draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positive counters. And I want to take away 2 negatives. I haven't got 2 negatives to take away, but what I can do is add in, let me just change my colour there, 2 0 pairs. I've not changed the value of the calculation, but I have now got my 2 negatives that I'll be able to take away. So if I want to take away 1 negative and I want to take away another negative because it's subtract negative 2, I have now done that, and hopefully what I can see left is my original 9 positives plus 2 more is 11, which, as we've said, is the same as doing 9 add 2. And then we come on to multiplication, which in fact most people find to be simpler. And again, this is one of those things, I say it quite a lot, that relies on you knowing your times tables. So if you don't know those, go back and watch my video on multiplication methods, because there's a little section at the start of that that talks about easy methods to learn your times tables, and I'd highly advise it. It comes up throughout the entire content of the GCSE, whether you're foundation or higher. Knowing your times tables confidently will just speed you up and minimise your chances of mistakes. So we know that 5 times 7 is 35. If we introduce a negative into this situation, so 5 times negative 7, that just means we need to introduce a negative into our answer. So if 5 times 7 is 35, 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. That one negative symbol changes our answer from a positive to a negative. Here are 2 questions for you to have a go at. You might be able to do these really quickly. You might even not need to pause the video, but if you do want to pause the video, do so now, because I'm going to go through the answer. Because I'm confident with my times tables, I know that 3 times 4 is 12. And based on the previous example, I know that once I introduce one negative symbol, that changes the answer from being positive to negative. So we get negative 12. With this next question, it's exactly the same as the second example on the previous slide. It's just the negatives on the first number. That doesn't make any difference. If you've got one negative in your question, your answer will be negative. What I've seen some people do to help them out is to write the same question with no negatives, just so they can remind themselves of what the positive answer is, and then use that to compare the answer when we introduce that one negative. So if it's easier for you to write down the original calculation without any negatives, you're more than welcome to. Now I know if 2 times 8 is 16 and I introduce one negative, so I've now got negative 2 times 8, that will be negative 16. And then coming back to, for those of you that have ever heard someone say 2 negatives makes a positive, that is true in the case of multiplication. So in the previous one, negative 2 times positive 8 was negative 16. If you introduce another negative again, it takes it back to positive. And that would continue. If you kept multiplying by negative numbers, it will switch between a positive and a negative. So negative 2 times negative 8 takes us back to positive 16. Here are 2 questions for you to have a go at using the same principles. If you need to pause the video, do so now. Negative 6 times 7 is negative 42. You may have done 6 times 7 to begin with, just to work that one out first and then introduce the 1 negative. And then when we have 2 negatives, so negative 6 times negative 7, that takes us back to the positive form, which would be positive 42. And this same pattern works with division as well. Again, really helpful to know your times tables. I know that 12 divided by 4 is 3. And therefore, if I introduce 1 negative symbol into the calculation, 12 divided by negative 4 would be negative 3. That would also be the case if the negative number came first. If there was 1 negative divided by a positive, that would still be negative. Here are your questions. Pause the video now for more time. I know that 15 divided by 3 is 5, and therefore bringing in 1 negative into the calculation, 15 divided by negative 3 becomes negative 5. And this is what I meant. You can still have the negative on the first number as long as there's only 1 negative in the calculation. Negative 30 divided by 6 is negative 5, because I know that positive 30 divided by positive 6 is positive 5. So the introduction of 1 negative into this calculation makes the answer negative. And just like with multiplication, when you've got 2 negatives in the calculation, it's almost like they cancel each other out. We go back to positive. So when we have 1 negative in the calculation, the answer is negative. And when we have 2 negatives in the calculation, it brings us back to positive. Here are 2 questions for you to have a go at. Pause the video for more time. Okay, negative 28 divided by 4 is negative 7. And then when we introduce 2 negatives to the calculation, negative 28 divided by negative 4 is positive 7. Well done for sticking with it for this long. We're going to go through some quick multiple choice questions just to get you to check your understanding. You may still need to draw your counters out, and that is absolutely fine. I'll give you a bit of time for each question, but if the timer puts you off and you need to pause the video to have a bit longer, that's absolutely fine, and we will get right into it. So your first question is 12 plus negative 3. Well done if you said C9. Your next question is negative 15 add negative 7. Here are your options. Remember, look back at your notes because we did do all of these types of questions in the examples. It's good to have a variety of notes to look back on, and you should have something to help with every question. If you said D, negative 22, that is correct. Here's your next one. 3 take away negative 7. Here are your options. And the answer to that one was C10. A little bit trickier. We've got negative 9 subtract negative 8. That one was C, negative 1. Then we're moving on to multiplication. We have got 8 multiplied by negative 6. Here are your options. That one was A, negative 48. Then we've got negative 3 times by negative 20. That one was D, positive 60. On to division for the last couple. We have got 50 divided by negative 5. That one was A, negative 10. And our final one, negative 99 divided by negative 9. Here are your options. And the answer is B, positive 11. Well done for taking part in that segment. And now we've just got a little bit of independent practice. 8 questions, all mixed up. You will notice you've got a bit of each of the 4 operations. Pause the video now so you've got a bit of time to work through these, and the answers will be coming up in just a second. And here are the answers to these questions. Take a few seconds to mark those and check you've got them right. If there's anything you're still not quite getting, that's fine. Go back and watch the examples again. You might just need to see them a second time. A big well done for taking part in this lesson today. Everything you do towards your independent study or your revision is helping you to get a better grade when you come to sit your exams. Remember to subscribe for more lessons, and if you prefer shorter form content such as quizzes and revision tips, make sure you're also following us over on TikTok and Instagram. Thank you for watching. I'm Charlotte, and I'll see you again in another video soon.